I'd like to go ahead and prepare to introduce such a good friend of mine, an influence on my own politics and my own life. I should add in as a quick little fun fact. When I moved out to New York City, and perhaps several months before that, when I started watching the videos that Caleb was putting out and the videos that Flame of Liberation was putting out, I realized that there was something so important about this message. It requires an entire change of lifestyle. And what I mean by that is, before I became a friend of the Center for Political Innovation, I was severely overweight. Since then, in the last year, I have lost 70 pounds, much to the thanks of the work I have done at the Center for Political Innovation and the lifestyle change that comes with it. So without further ado, they call him Russian state-affiliated media. Well, maybe they should call him China state-affiliated media, because a lot of you probably don't know this. But in 2017, Caleb was asked to make a video in 2017 for the Communist Party of China's Party Congress Convention. And that was shown to goodness knows how many Chinese communists. So maybe they should call them Chinese state-affiliated media. I'm not done. Maybe they should call them Nicaraguan state-affiliated media. Because Caleb and I and Lily were in Nicaragua in November to watch the election that occurred in 2021 and verify its authenticity, which we did and we were proud to do. Maybe they should call them Venezuelan state-affiliated media. Maybe they should call them Brazil state-affiliated media, because in 2016 he was invited to Brazil by the Trade Union Center to give a presentation about the reversing of imperialism to manipulate oil prices for the Brazilian people. They should call him U.S.-affiliated media, because he worked with the great former U.S. attorney turned anti-imperialist Ramsey Clark. This last one's my favorite, and maybe Twitter will see this and actually do it. They should call him Occupy Wall Street state-affiliated media. Because 10 years ago, Caleb was at Occupy Wall Street trying to get people to refuse to support the U.S. destruction of Libya and to stand against the Hillary Clinton State Department that was dead set on destroying the success of Green Libya under Colonel Gaddafi. Maybe they should call him Occupy Wall Street state-affiliated media. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we all know who I'd like to welcome to the microphone for his keynote presentation, Mr. Caleb Maupin.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. I am so happy right now to see how this conference has turned out, with all the threats that we got, with all the anxiety in the lead up to this. Seeing how well today went has really put a smile on my face, and I'm so happy. And I want to say that I deeply love every person in this room. We are really the cream of the crop. We are sticking to our guns. We are refusing to back down. We are standing against U.S. imperialism. We're talking about who the real aggressors are in Ukraine. We're standing against the barrage of lies in U.S. mainstream media. And I am really proud of everyone here, and I'm proud of the work that we're doing, and I can't wait to take this show on the road, and we're going to do this in many other cities. You know, one thing that I often talk about is I'll talk about how it's important to be positive when you speak. And there's actually a very funny story I heard years ago. It's about a small town pastor in a southern town. And he was a very stern, conservative pastor in a southern town. And, you know, one week he got up and his sermon was about why dancing is wrong. And the next week he got up and gave a sermon, why drinking is wrong. You know, the next time, why men and women swimming in the same swimming pools is wrong. So his congregation took him aside and they're like, Pastor, we're with you, but can you be a little more positive? Can you be just a little more positive in your sermons? And so he said, okay, you want me to be positive? I got it. So the next week he got up in front of everybody and he said, I am positively against drinking. I am positively against dancing. I am positively against mixed swimming. And that shows that you can't always convince people. Some people just don't get the message. But I try not to be glum. But, sometimes you will get a positive reaction to this message in places you don't expect it. It's kind of funny, people often on my streams, people will tell me I come across as just this wholesome guy. I'm just this wholesome guy. I don't drink and I don't cuss very much, and I'm just this wholesome young man. And I always kind of laugh when I hear that, because I'm from a very small town in Ohio. I grew up in a town, it's actually where Smucker's Jelly comes from. It's called Orville, Ohio. That's where I grew up. And I'm not sure that everyone in Orville, Ohio would agree that I'm the wholesome young man that I come across as. I'm not sure if you interviewed the people who went to high school with me, they'd have the same opinion of me. And I'm going to tell you about something that happened. It happened between my freshman and sophomore year of high school. I won't get into the specifics of the situation, but let's just say I ended up in summer school. I was in summer school taking summer school geometry. And it was interesting. It was summer school geometry, and it was a small class, about 12, 14 people, and we were in this room for 5 hours every day studying geometry. And there were some people that were there because they'd been in juvenile hall, and there were some people there because they wanted to graduate early, and some people there because they'd failed the year before, and it was kind of a rougher bunch of people. And, we were kind of stuck in the room, and the teacher wasn't really teaching. They would just kind of give us worksheets at the beginning of the class, and so we would sit there and do the worksheets. And, people talk, and high school kids bully each other, and I was handing out communist newspapers. Like, what else am I going to do, right? So I'm handing out communist newspapers, and this one guy across the room, he looks at me and he says, "Communists are a bunch of faggots. Communists are a bunch of faggots." And I'm just kind of sitting there like, I don't want to have a fight here, right? I'm already in summer school, for Christ's sakes, and I'm a little nervous. And then immediately behind me, this kid jumps up out of nowhere, and he jumps up and he says, "No, communists are not faggots." He's like, "My uncle fought in Vietnam. Those communists are badass motherfuckers. They shot people in the face. They set traps for people. Those communists are badass motherfuckers. You have no idea. Those communists are dangerous. Kim Jong-il runs people over with tanks. Those communists are badass motherfuckers." Not the reaction that I was expecting, but there you go. So you can see a positive reaction coming from different directions, right? Perhaps we ought to think about how the term tanky can be reinterpreted and celebrated by different strata of U.S. society. But I want to talk about another experience that I had in summer school between my sophomore and freshman year of high school, which is that, in that class that I was in, I was sitting next to a young woman who I got to know pretty well, I guess. I mean, if you put somebody in a room with somebody for 5 hours every day, and, you're going to get to know them. And we'll call her Christine. That's obviously not her real name, but I'm not going to dox her and tell her personal business in front of everybody. We'll just call her Christine. And Christine was in summer school because she wanted to graduate early from high school. And the reason that she wanted to graduate early from high school was because she wanted to join the U.S. Marine Corps. She was very excited to join the U.S. Marine Corps. And I, was someone who was very opposed to the war in Iraq, and we had a lot of arguments over the course of this summer school experience. But the arguments that we argued about politics. I was trying to give her Noam Chomsky books and stuff, but that's not really what was important. Because after sitting next to Christine and talking with her and some of the other people in the class, I found out the real reason why she was going into the U.S. Marine Corps. Because, one thing that people like to do, I guess it's more of a working class thing, is people like to brag about the times their parents beat them, or brag about the punishments that they received. And Christine opened up to us one day, and she talked about how her mother would punish her by beating her with a wooden spoon. And she talked about how she'd get written up in school. The teacher would say, "You're going to take a note home," and she'd say, "I don't care. And the whole time she's thinking, my mother's going to beat me with a wooden spoon when I get home." And then when her mother would beat her, would strike her, every time her mother would hit her, she would say, "It doesn't hurt." And her mother would whack her, and she would say, "It doesn't hurt. Whack, it doesn't hurt." And she described that experience to us. And when I heard that, and I heard that she was very excited to go into the Marine Corps, I understood why she was going into the Marine Corps. And it wasn't because she wanted to kill black and brown people. It wasn't because she was, piped up with chauvinism and nationalism. It was because she wanted some goddamn respect in this world. That's what it was about. She wanted to lift up her head with dignity. And there are so many working class people in this country who feel downtrodden, who feel disrespected. And they want to hold up their heads with dignity and say, I'm proud of who I am. They want to be bold, they want to be tough, they want to show that they have strength. And I think about what people are going through, and I think about how, regardless of the fact that we are definitely against all these wars, we shouldn't be against the military itself. This idea that anyone who's ever served in the military is a murderer or a racist, we got to throw that out. That needs to be completely eradicated from leftist circles. Because polls show that it's people in the military who are against these wars right now. Did you know that? The polls show that people in the military are more against the wars than average people are. A lot of people in the military who start looking into the facts and saying, why is it that we're being sent overseas to die? What does America really have to gain from backing Al-Qaeda in Syria or backing up the Azov battalion in Ukraine? And when you can't escape it, when it's your actual life, you're in the military, your body's on the line, that forces you to start asking questions. And there was a lot of support for Ron Paul among the military. And, Lieutenant Colonel Tulsi Gabbard, she comes out of the military as well, and her anti-war stance also comes out of the military. And I think those of us who believe in socialism, need to find a way to relate to people in the military. Now, when I talk about how people in the United States are unhappy about things, I mean, you look at the economy right now. We're being told now to accept $5, $6 a gallon because, Russia's so bad. We're being told to accept this inflation and the rising costs of food. And I would say that there's a lot of Americans right now who are saying, we're tired of this shit. There's a lot of Americans right now who are looking at years of student debt just for going to college, and they're saying, we're tired of this shit. And there's a lot of working class Americans who are looking at their communities with crumbling roads and crumbling infrastructure and empty foreclosed homes, and they're saying, we're tired of this shit. There's a lot of Americans who are looking at this prison-for-profit system and this opioid epidemic created by doctors being pushed to overprescribe dangerous medications. They're saying, we're tired of this shit. They're seeing their relatives come home from wars overseas, scarred with trauma for the rest of their life. They're saying, we're tired of this shit. And then, when they hear our politicians come forward and instead of offering us real solutions, offering us more of their political pornography, they're saying, we are tired of this shit. We're tired of it. Are we not tired of it? You go to a gas station right now in any working class community in this country, you're going to see something. You're going to see a car pull up. And there's going to be a woman driving the car, and there's going to be kids in the back seat. And that woman will pull up the car, and they'll go to the gas pump, and they'll very carefully stick that nozzle into the gas tank, and they'll just put $10, $12 worth of gas in. They're not filling up the tank. They're just putting $10 or $12 worth of gas in. Why are they doing that? They're doing that because that $10 or $12 worth of gas, it's not going to get them very far, but it'll get the kids to school. It'll get them to work that day. They're budgeting. They're trying to get by. They tell us this is the greatest country in the world. This is the greatest country in the world. How often have we heard that, right? You ask, well, why? I mean, what measurement? Are you saying we're the richest country in the world? Are you saying, and they look at you and they say, you don't think it's the greatest country in the world? You must be brainwashed because clearly it's the greatest country in the world. But you look at the United States of America right now. We did, at one point, have a very, very good economy. You go back to the 1950s and 60s, the USA did have the highest standard of living in the world. But all of those cars, and all of those houses, and all of those hula hoops, and all of those refrigerators were dripping in blood. They were dripping in the blood of the Korean people who were being bombed and destroyed. They were dripping in the blood of the Vietnamese people, the blood of the indigenous people who were slaughtered. They were dripping with the blood of the Africans killed in the transatlantic slave trade, Jim Crow segregation that was going on in the South. You can talk about how the very land we're standing on was stolen from Mexico. Abraham Lincoln, I believe, referred to it as one of the most unjust wars ever fought, how Texas was acquired. And there's a legal term, they talk about fruit of a poison tree. And that's that if something is created in an impure way, the result is also impure. The idea is if the police search your home, they don't have a search warrant, The result that they find is inadmissible in court because it was acquired in an impure way. It is tainted. I think in the Islamic tradition, they talk about haram or sin and how sin corrupts everything. If you steal food, that food might make you sick because you acquired it in an impure way. Or if you buy a house and that the loan that you got to buy the house was not consistent with the Islamic laws, that house might catch on fire or it might burn because it was corrupted. It was acquired in an impure way. And I think it's very safe to say that the United States of America is cursed. The United States of America is cursed. A curse hangs over America. The United States was created with the genocide against Native Americans. It was created with the international slave trade. It's propped itself up with this global international system of imperialism, grinding countries into poverty. And it's cursed. A curse hangs over U.S. society. And our mission is trying to lift that curse. Our mission is trying to rescue the United States from the nightmare that has been created. And there were some of us who even back in the 1950s, even back in the 60s and 70s, even in the 90s when the economy was still strong, some of us knew something was wrong. Some of us knew in our guts that something was deeply wrong with this society. We talk about all the horror movies that come out and the monsters that exist in the back of our minds. So many of us knew that something was wrong. And I think that the rise of the woke culture is largely an attempt at people kind of feeling validated in that knowledge. The wokeness is an attempt. They feel like if they can just morally purify themselves or make good tweets or cancel somebody on social media like Peter and Miss Astronaut Cowboy talked about, they can somehow make that curse go away. They can purify themselves. Well, it doesn't work that way. The only way the United States can be saved from this nightmare is by breaking out of the open international system, by moving towards socialism and establishing a new society. That is what must be done. We must break the chains of capitalism. We need a government of action that will fight for working families. And we, at the Center for Political Innovation, we take this seriously. I've often joked that a lot of people that call themselves Marxists or leftists, they think it's Little League Baseball. And what do they tell kids in Little League Baseball? It's not about whether you win or lose, it's just how you play the game. Right? If you just do everything right, it doesn't matter if we actually get socialism. If we can make ourselves feel good and have rallies and we can chant all the right political slogans, it doesn't matter. And if we can just prove that we're the most morally pure and all of that, that's what we can do. And it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous, and it's not serious politics. At the Center for Political Innovation, we do offer serious politics. We can offer a number of things that you won't get from other voices speaking in the name of socialism. Number one, we offer a clear definition of what socialism and capitalism actually are. It's pretty basic, right? If you're going to go advocating socialism, you ought to have, going to go denouncing capitalism, you ought to know what these things are. But we're pretty clear about what they are. Capitalism is a system of production organized for profit. As Frederick Engels said, under capitalism, the means of production only function as preliminary transformation into capital, meaning that we don't have food so people can eat it. We have food so big box stores and agribusiness can make profit selling it. And under capitalism, we don't have housing so people can live in it. We have housing so landlords and banks and others can make profits selling it. Under capitalism, money is in charge. Profits are in command, as Mao Zedong, the leader of the Chinese Revolution, said. That's capitalism. Capitalism is a system of production organized for profit. And socialism is the abolition of capitalism. It's when you have a government based in communities, serving the people, that forces the economy to work in the interests of the people, and profits are no longer in command. It's when the economy is organized to serve public good, not the profits of a few. Socialism is a government of action that controls the means of production and organizes them for the benefit of society. It's a government of action that fights for working families. So we have a clear definition of socialism and capitalism. And it's socialism that made Russia and China into the strong countries they are today. And it's socialism that made Cuba an island with a medical system that's admired all over the world. And when Libya was socialist under the leadership of Gaddafi, it had the highest life expectancy on the African continent, and it was doing amazingly well. People were trying to get into Libya to get jobs, in the prosperous economy that existed there. And now that Libya has been bombed back into the open, free trade, international capitalist system, people are drowning in the Mediterranean trying to get out of Libya. And it's pretty clear around the world, you can see the results. Vietnam has had great success with their socialist market economy. And let's be clear, there's room for private businesses in a socialist society. right? The idea that everything must be run by the state is not practical. We've learned that. China was able to adjust their economy, and as a result of adjusting their economy to have a market sector, but yet keeping the state in control, keeping 5-year economic plans, keeping government control of banking, regulating and controlling the economy, they've been able to have great successes in economic growth. I don't think there's any need for the government to run the restaurants or the government to run the hotels. I don't think that the private sector should be in charge of the banking system. Things like healthcare, things like education, things like essential infrastructure should be controlled by society. And furthermore, if you go to China, one of the realities in China is that even the private companies are not really operating according to profit. Because at any point, the Chinese Communist Party can come in and say, no, you're going to do this, and force them to work in the interest of society. And you look at these huge mega corporations like Huawei Technologies, and you look at the great fusion energy research they're doing, it's pretty clear that in China, despite the fact that there is a market sector, despite the fact that a lot of people are getting wealthy, profits are not in command. And it's breaking out of the irrational rule of profits that has enabled China to be so prosperous. And that is where socialism is in the 21st century. Cuba wants to be more like China. Venezuela wants to be more like China. Nicaragua wants to be more like China. This model of organizing the economy to serve public good and allowing a market sector to exist for the benefit of a socialist society, this is an effective way of organizing an economy. The Soviet Union was unable to make the changes necessary to preserve their socialism. Perestroika and glasnost, they tried to adjust the socialist system, but they did it in a way that destroyed the Soviet Union. They weren't unable to bend, so they broke. But China is constantly reinventing itself and constantly adjusting its socialist system to be more effective. And what Xi Jinping is doing right now with his mass line campaigns and his crackdowns on corruption is showing how resilient and how ever-changing Chinese socialism is. There's plenty for us to learn from. Another thing that we offer is that we have a clear definition of imperialism. So what is imperialism? Imperialism is when you send troops to a country, right? No, imperialism is Star Wars, I think Peter's talked about, right? It's Star Wars, it's the
Star Wars.
Yeah.
It's country do bad thing.
Country do bad thing. Well, no, imperialism is capitalism in its monopoly stage. It is the rule of the world by big banks and corporations based in Western countries, grinding countries into poverty, keeping the world poor, and making the world poorer so that Wall Street and London can stay rich. That's what imperialism is. And the countries around the world that are having great successes and lifting their people out of poverty, like Nicaragua that we heard about from David, these are countries that have broken out of imperialism. And our mission is to break the United States out of imperialism and rebuild the United States as a society free from the rule of multinational corporations and banks, force the economy to serve public good, reorganize the economy to serve the people. So another thing that we can offer is we can offer a clear understanding of the failures of the American left. Why is it that the United States Marxist and socialist movement is so weak? Why is it so weak? It's so weak because it is a fact that in 1949, the CIA launched their Congress for Cultural Freedom program and began manipulating left-wing organizations, funneling money to Trotskyites and anarchists and anti-socialist elements. It is a that we have seen George Soros' dirty hands all through the organized political left. Foundation money is used to corrupt organizations, to push identity politics and a message that's not consistent, to obscure class struggle. It is a fact that Project MKUltra was launched by the CIA to push LSD and drugs into left-wing spaces, to push pessimism and Eastern mysticism and hopelessness in order to manipulate our movement. It is a fact. And furthermore, it is a fact that Abigail Thorne of Philosophy Tube and BreadTube are being funded by the British Empire and the British royal family. This is a fact. This is a fact, folks. Who told you about BreadTube? Who told you that BreadTube serves imperialism? Who told you BreadTube serves imperialism? Max Blumenthal produced the smoking gun. We know now who Vosh is working for. We know now who Thought Slime is working for. We know who has set up all of this. And if we didn't have the smoking gun right in front of us, their behavior in relation to this Ukraine crisis would be even further proof. So there you go. Now, another thing that we offer at the Center for Political Innovation is a psychological approach to cadre. Folks, my goal is for every person at the Center for Political Innovation to find strength within themselves, to find heroism. Social media is making people weaker. It's about making people afraid. It's about making people dependent on that validation. Did I get enough likes? Did I get enough approval? Do other people agree with me? Maybe I shouldn't have said this. It's about making people afraid to take a stand. But the great heroes of history, you want to talk about Joan of Arc, you want to talk about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., are people that knew how to stand against the crowd. They're people who knew how to take a tough stand and refuse to back down. And that's what I would like to cultivate at the Center for Political Innovation, people that are heroic and can find their inner strength. And I'll tell you, I credit the communist movement for that in my own life. I've told the story many times of when I was 15 years old, I went to a communist bookstore for a discussion. It was a nice discussion about the war in Iraq or whatever. And I was in the bookstore, and then a communist handed me a stack of newspapers. They said, you know what? We're going to go out and sell the paper. I was 15 years old, and I said, wait a minute. You want me to walk up to people that I don't know and try to get them to give me actual money for a newspaper about communism? You got to be joking. I am not doing that. I can't do that. And they're like, no, we do that all the time. It's fine. And they handed me a stack of newspapers, and I was just, I didn't know what to do. I was just nervous, and I remember I walked up to people, and I'm like, you want some information on socialism? It was just so uncomfortable for me. But I remember the first communist newspaper I ever sold, I sold it to a couple. And there was a couple, they were walking down the street, and I walked up to them and tried to sell them this communist newspaper. And the man said, well, young man, I don't agree with you, but I see that you go to Oberlin College, and so I'll buy it from you. I was wearing my Letterman's jacket from Bourville, Ohio, so he saw the big O, and he thought I went to Oberlin College, and so I said, I like Oberlin, and so he bought the newspaper from me. That's the first communist newspaper I ever sold. But believe it or not, at that point, I was quite a shy person. At that point, I was quite embarrassed. My family was always saying to me, stop talking all this crazy politics, stop doing that. But I discovered I was quite good at engaging with people about politics. And in a lot of ways, I would say the communist movement saved my life. I'll just be real about that. I wouldn't be where I am right now if it weren't for communism. And that's why I haven't given up on this. People say, oh, you got a great job, you're a reporter and all that. Why don't you just sit back and enjoy life? No, I'm in this for real, folks. And we have so much that needs to be done. And the world is moving in such a dangerous direction. And we need to stand strong and keep going because there is so much that needs to be done. And that's what I want to cultivate in everyone in this organization. I want people to find the strength within themselves. I want us to stand up at these woke shops that they do. Yeah, if you've ever been to one of these woke shops, it's all about cultivating people's weakness, making people feel like children, making people feel ashamed. Yeah, if you hear me clap once, if you hear me clap twice, if you hear me clap 3 times, now we're all going to sit around and talk about our favorite pizza. We've been there. That's not what we do at the Center for Political Innovation, and I will never allow that to happen, I can guarantee you that. I'll be the first to resign if we ever start having workshops at the Center for Political Innovation. Another thing that we offer is we offer a tolerance for political diversity. I don't agree with everyone in this room about everything, and I'm sure that everyone in this room does not agree with me about everything. And I can't think of a greater example of that than 2 of our leading comrades. We got Lily Goldklang, stand up, and Keaton Mansfield, stand up. Now, these 2 people, I went to Nicaragua with them in November to monitor the elections. You could not find 2 people that are further apart in terms of background and political orientation, etc., right? We got Keaton Mansfield, who is a conservative Catholic farm boy from rural Illinois. We've got Lily Goldklang, who is a Jewish trans woman from the suburbs of Atlanta. And these are two people that would not speak to each other if it weren't for the Center for Political Innovation. These are two people that would never have crossed paths. But since last May, they have been in the same organization, putting forward the same political slogans, working to build up for the same political goals, working together. And this is what we need in the United States right now. We need to get over the red state, blue team versus red team divide. We need to bring people together. That's what we need. And we have a program that can bring the country together. That's what we have. And that's what I like to see here. That's what we have here. And I hope that many people from many different walks of life, look, there are people in the organization who feel like me, that abortion should be legal, and that it must be legal, right to choose. There are people in the Center for Political Innovation who don't agree with that. They say, I'm a Muslim, or I'm a Christian, or I'm an Orthodox Jew, and I don't feel that abortion should be legal. And I'm going to disagree with them about abortion, but they're welcome in the group. And the same goes for gay marriage, and the same goes for a lot of issues. We have got to build a serious, united front around an economic program to rescue this country. That's what we have to do. And that means we have to break the rules. It means we have to work with people we might not agree with. Because we're serious about this, because we actually want to get things done. Now, another thing that the Center for Political Innovation offers, we offer a scientific understanding of revolution. That's the first thing we should be talking about. If we want to get from here to socialism, how do we get there? Let's be serious. Well, the process of transitioning towards socialism is generally 3 stages. First, there is a united front built around a program. In Russia, that program was peace, land, and bread. In China, that program was defeating the Japanese and redistributing the land. And a serious program is developed, and society is mobilized around that program, a program to change society. And political leaders emerge who are supporting that program. That's the first step. And then from there, political leaders come into office, or mass movements are created around that program. But in order to enact that program, the nature of the state has to change. We're not going to be able to build a socialist America with the FBI and the CIA and the Pentagon functioning as they currently are. You would need a new intelligence agency. You'd need a new federal police force. You'd need a new orientation for the military. The nature of the state would have to change. In order to enact a people's program, you would need to change the nature of the state. And that's what the scientific Marxists call the dictatorship of the proletariat, when the nature of the state changes. The state goes from the hands of the capitalists to the hands of the people. And then, with the state in the hands of the people, the state can then move ahead and start creating a socialist society, a society where growth and innovation is no longer held back by the irrationality of greed. This is a 3-stage process. That's why the Communist Manifesto ends with 10 planks, right? Those are the 10 planks of the United Front, and that's what communists generally do. They put forward a serious program, and we have a serious program. We have 4 points, 4 economic points that a lot of people could agree to, but not the ruling class, and not the big corporations, and not the banks. And we want to build a united front around those 4 planks. We want to mobilize society to get those 4 planks, and we understand that in order for those 4 planks to be enacted, the nature of the Pentagon, and the police, and the military would have to change, and that with a new state, we could have a fully socialist society. This is the way communist parties operate all over the world. The Center for Political Innovation, the way we talk, if you go to South America, if you go to Africa, if you go to Asia, people say this is common sense. They think there's nothing remotely profound about what we're doing. But the US left is so infiltrated and so manipulated and so delusional and crazy. What we're doing here sounds very, very unique and original to people in the United States. I believe somebody accused us of trying to imitate the Communist Party. I think there's some people in the Communist Party who said, you're trying to imitate the Communist Party. Well, let me just say this. We're not trying to imitate the Communist Party, because there's some pretty key differences between our approach and the approach put forward by the leaders of the Communist Party. We're what the Communist Party should be, and would be if it wasn't controlled by the FBI. Let's be real about that. That's the reality. And And their crazy over-the-top reaction to us is one of the biggest confirmations that we are right that I've ever seen. Let me just put it that way. Another thing I'd like to make clear is that we offer a serious political message, and we go to people with real policy solutions. If you go to working class people and say you want to have a big civil war and violently overthrow the government and destroy their neighborhood and communities, you are not serious. You come across as a lunatic. And we are very, very clear that we advocate a peaceful transition to socialism through the democratic process. We'd like to see progressives and socialists elected. We would like to see progressive legislation leading toward our 4-point plan passed. That's what we would like to see. We don't advocate violence and instability. It's Joe Biden and the capitalist system and the decaying political process in the United States that is leading to violence and instability. We are offering the road to peace. We're offering the way out of the chaos. We're offering the way to stability. That's what we are offering. It's them, with cable news, with the social media hyper insanity. They're the ones dividing the United States. They're the ones fomenting instability and chaos. We want to bring the country together, we want to bring an end to this, and we want peace with the people of the world. We want to start doing business with China, and doing business with Russia, and cooperating with countries on the basis of win-win cooperation. We want to end this open international system of greed and neoliberalism. We are offering a message of peace, jobs, democracy, equality, stability, hope, progress. We're not violent, we're not radicals, we're not extremists. We advocate a politics of common sense. It's common sense that people should have jobs. It's common sense that people should have education. It's common sense that economic growth is good and not bad. It's common sense that people should be rising out of poverty. It's common sense that fusion energy should be a priority and that we should be trying to get out of the nightmare of fossil fuels by going to a higher fuel source, not a weaker one. That's common sense, and that's what we offer. We offer the road to peace, stability, and common sense. And at risk of beating a dead horse, let me just say this. I've got a message to all the rad libs, CIA, fake socialists, Maoist ultra-leftists, grifters, movementists, cultists. I've got a message to the people who tried to get into this conference earlier today and disrupt, and we got them the hell out of here. If they're watching right now, I've got a message for you. And that message is, stay the hell away from us. That's our message. Stay the hell away from us. We're not bothering you. You can do your thing. We're not coming to your rallies. If you want to do your thing and burn a dumpster or whatever, we're not bothering you. We're not bothering you. Seriously, we're not bothering you. Mao Zedong said, you fight your way, I fight mine. You fight your way, I fight mine. We're doing our own thing here. This is how we want to organize because we're serious. And if you don't like it, that's fine. You don't have to participate. But you also don't have to bother us. And we will protect our meetings. We will protect ourselves. We protected our meeting here today, and I want to applaud our security team for the great work they did. The great work they did preventing the attack on this meeting that was coming. There was a huge amount of intimidation to try and keep us from having this meeting today, and it failed because we're not afraid, and we are here, and our message is not going to end. And we are going to do this in Chicago, and we're going to do this in Seattle, and we are going to do this in every corner of this country because people need to hear this message, and they need it desperately. Now, when I think about the kids in the back of that car, where the mother's putting in $10 or $12 worth of gas, we have to remember that that's who we're fighting for. We're fighting for the millions, not for the millionaires. We're fighting for the Americans who have been left behind. And I want to say another thing. I'm speaking to Joe Biden right now. Watch yourself and your moves very carefully. Watch your moves very, very carefully. Because what you're doing with Russia right now, flirting with World War III, getting us into a very dangerous situation, it could have some very, very, very serious results. Because I think that there are a lot of people in the U.S. military, like my friend Christine. And I think that there are probably a lot more Edward Snowdens in the NSA than we realize. And I think that there are probably a lot more Chelsea Mannings in the U.S. Army. And furthermore, I think there's a lot more people in the Pentagon who think like Tulsi Gabbard. And you better be very careful, Joe Biden. You better be very, very, very careful. Because if you tell working people from Ohio and Pennsylvania and Alabama and Texas to go fight to prop up some fake democracy in Ukraine, they might do the opposite. They might turn around and fight for a real democracy right here in Washington, D.C. That's what they might want to do. You watch yourself, Joe Biden. You watch yourself, Joe Biden. We don't want that. Now let's be very clear, we don't want that. We don't want that to happen. We don't want chaos and instability in the United States. We want a peaceful democratic transition through the process. We want to move towards socialism. We want the United States to move toward a new prosperous, rational economy, have a better relationship with the world. We don't want instability and chaos. But I cannot guarantee you that the U.S. Army is ready to march into battle against Russia or China or Venezuela or Iran. And I think that if Joe Biden's serious and he looks at the state of the country, he might come to the conclusion that maybe he should focus on dealing with problems right here instead of dealing with problems overseas. I think that might be the honest thing to say. Joe Biden should be very, very careful about whether or not he wants to try and bring on the apocalypse. Because, I've read the Bible. I know what comes after the apocalypse. I just want to read this particular piece, Revelations 22, the very, very last book of the Bible. It writes, "In the midst of the street and on either side of the river was there the tree of life, which bare 12 manner of fruits, and yielded her fruit every month. And the leaves of the tree were for the healing of nations. And there shall be no more curse." Imagine the healing of nations. Imagine getting over this ugly curse that has hung over U.S. society. Imagine moving toward a country where people are coming together and building up their communities. Imagine what Texas is going to look like after our first 5-year economic plan. People get annoyed with me because I can be a little bit of a stickler, right? I have said many times that I do not like the phrase abolish billionaires. Now, I have no problem taxing billionaires to pay for things like schools and healthcare and jobs, but the phrase abolish billionaires is not consistent with Marxism. Why? Because the goal of Marxism is to build a society with so much wealth and so much abundance that the need for the very existence of the state fades away, that all inequality fades away, that we have a society where people can kind of just do what they want to do and take what they need. That's the ultimate goal of Marxism. Communism, the higher stage, is based on vast material abundance. It's about achieving so much wealth and prosperity that social hierarchies and the need for an oppressive state and inequality among people fades away. That is the goal. Marxism is not about making people poorer. It's about making society and making people in society so wealthy that inequality fades away. That's why Deng Xiaoping said poverty is not socialism, but to be rich is glorious. And we want all the people of America and all the people of the world to be rich. That's what we want. We want to eradicate poverty from this earth and create a world with so much wealth that the horrors of the society we live in fade away and people can live a much more comfortable means of existence. I compared it to back in the Middle Ages, right? Back in the Middle Ages, having a mirror was a very valued item, right? If you had a mirror, that made you were like a king or a queen. Would it have been the right thing to say in the year 1300, abolish mirrors? No! It would be fight for a society where enough that everyone could have a mirror. That's the goal. Wealth is not the problem. Capitalism is the problem. Exploitation is the problem. That is what we need to be clear about. And when we say things like abolish billionaires, it feeds into the idea that we're destructive. It feeds into the idea that we just want to tear things down. Somebody has more than us, and we're mad about it, and we want to punish them, and we want to tear them down to the level that we're at. And that is not an attitude that is going to save the United States from capitalism. That is an attitude of wallowing in misery and self-pity. It's an attitude that's cultivated by social media quite a bit, but it's not consistent with what we're about. And I'm quite patriotic, and I'm glad to say I'm patriotic. That doesn't mean, we endorse the chauvinistic jingoism of this society. It doesn't mean that we go around tearing down other countries. It doesn't mean we buy into the lies to support these wars, but we love the country. We want a better America for working people, and that's only possible through socialism. But there are some things about U.S. society that we might want to change. Some things. I've often talked, if you haven't heard me talk about it before, about the Washington Monument. What does the Washington Monument look like? We all know what it looks like. And I was thinking about that one time, and it occurred to me, not only does it look like that, but I was reading a history book, and I found out that George Washington was sterile. Did you know this? All of his children were adopted. And that was because he had measles when he was a child. And that Washington Monument looks a lot like something that he could not do. Did you know this? He could not actually do what that statue looks like. And it occurred to me that maybe the idea for the Washington Monument was, George Washington was sitting around a bar or a pub with his friends, and he said, his friends said, "George, you've got it all. You're the first president, you're the richest man in the 13 colonies. But there's one thing that we can all do that you cannot do. And when you die, we are going to build a statue to the one thing that you cannot do that we can all do." And that's where I think the Washington Monument came from. But another interesting anecdote is, the tune. The Star Spangled Banner was not the original national anthem. I thought that was great, that opening ceremony, by the way. I want to thank everyone who participated. We rehearsed that a lot. I'm sure it'll go viral and we'll all get canceled 100 times for it, but it needed to be done. It really needed to be done. It was a big deal to do that here in the center of the empire. But the Star Spangled Banner was not originally the national anthem of the United States. It was a popular song that came out and was popular in the culture after the War of 1812. But the tune for it was actually taken from a pub song. I don't know if people know this. It was taken from the Anacreon song, which was a song that was popular that people would sing in bars. And I'll sing you the original words. This is true, the original words to the Star Spangled Banner. It was called the Anacreon song, after the Roman poet Anacreon, the hedonist. To Anacreon in heaven, where we sat in full glee, a few sons of harmony sent a petition that he their inspirer and their patron would be. And they received this reply from the jolly old Grecian: "Harp, fiddle, and flute, no longer be mute. I'll lend you my name and inspire you to boot. And besides, I'll instruct you like me to entwine the myrtle of Venus with Bacchus's vine." That's how it went. That was the original. The Star Spangled Banner was originally the Anacreon song, and so I thought I might share that with you. But I'll just end my keynote remarks here by giving you a word of advice. We're very far from New York City. New York City has been my home for the last 10 years. I'm originally from Ohio, but New York City was an interesting place to adjust to. But I got a good word of advice from somebody who'd lived in New York City a long time. And they said, you ever go to New York City, be really, really, really careful, especially if you go down by Wall Street. Be really, really careful if you're walking down by Wall Street. Look over your head, be careful where you step, because those motherfuckers are going to be jumping any day now. Thanks, folks.